DFS. It is Friday, October 14th here in Draft Shark Studios in Rochester, New York. Welcome to the Week 6 DraftKings podcast. I'm your host, Matt Schauf. With me, as always, is Jared Smola. Jared, we should just kick things right off with this Arizona-Seattle matchup that's got plenty of fantasy upside for everybody and has, you know, a little bit of like rivalry for us with the Geno Smith, Kyler Murray thing going on. Cash quarterback, maybe I jumped too quickly into Arizona, Seattle, but who is your guy for DraftKings at QB?
Yeah, I'm playing Josh Allen. You can definitely make an argument for Geno Smith, but I'm playing Josh Allen. I mean, the guy is averaging 32 DraftKings points per game. He's gotten pulled from 2 of the 5 games early so far because the Bills have been blowing out their opponent. Sunday's not going to be a blowout versus the Chiefs. I think Buffalo's going to win, but it's not going to be a blowout. Allen's going to play the entire game. And the Chiefs defense, their pass defense in particular, is not good. They're 19th in Football Outsiders pass defense DVOA, 29th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks. So I think Allen's a good bet for 30-plus DK points again. And I'm just going to take that in cash. And there are enough values at the other positions to fit Allen in pretty easily this week.
Yeah, so that's the question. I mean, obviously, you don't have to make the case for Josh Allen in a lineup. The question is, what do you have to do to be able to fit him into a cash lineup? I don't need you to run through all of the specific guys, but what are the key moves that you need to make to get Josh Allen as your cash quarterback this week?
I mean, you need to play a cheap tight end, so you can't play, Kelce or Mark Andrews, and you need to play at least one cheap running back or wide receiver. I built my cash lineup right now has a cheap running back and a cheap receiver, which we'll get to, and it has Josh Allen and Justin Jefferson. So that kind of tells you how relatively easy it is to fit Josh Allen in there.
All right. Well, I'm not as good an architect as Jared is, so I'm going to go with Geno Smith at $5,700. 75% completions for the season, leads the league so far. First in PFF passing grade, 4th in QBR, 3rd in yards per pass attempt, 6th in touchdown rate. Now he's got this matchup, which Arizona is the 6th best scoring matchup for quarterbacks on the season so far. So, I mean, I never would have dreamed that by mid-October we'd be at the point where you don't really have to make a case for Geno Smith as a fantasy starting quarterback, but that's where we are based on what's happened so far this season.
Yeah, he's a good play. He's too cheap. He is second in our dollars per point rankings at quarterback behind Josh Allen. If you actually take away the 300-yard bonus for Allen, which we have him projected for, then Geno actually would be the top dollars per point value. So I have no issue with Geno Smith. If pricing was tighter and there weren't, as many strong, cheap plays, in my opinion, I'd be fine with Geno and cash.
I've been trying to think, not even trying so hard, but like the whole Geno situation of him being, basically a non-entity as far as what we're expecting from him to this point in his career. Now, all of a sudden looking like a solid quarterback. And it reminded me of Rich Gannon when he was like there and floating around the league, but then all of a sudden he popped up with the Raiders. He was on the plus side of 30. And, it's tough to trust a guy like that immediately, but at some point you have to be like, well, I got to go with what's going on right now. So just treat Geno Smith like Rich Gannon for the rest of the season. I think we'll be okay.
It's so funny you say that. I feel like I'm a bit too young to remember like the crappy Rich Gannon years. I remember him when he was like good later in his career, but we were talking last Sunday watching the games, and Lenny mentioned the same exact thing that Rich Gannon was kind of this guy who was bad for 6, 7, 8 years, and then had a really good final handful of years of his NFL career.
Yeah, he had 16 touchdowns, 16 interceptions in his first crack at starting in 1990 at age 25. He did not have a season with more than 12 touchdown passes after that until his age 34 season with the 1999 Raiders. So it's weird. It's not the kind of arc that you bet on, but it's not unprecedented what Geno Smith is doing is the point.
Yeah, and again, you're not paying for elite quarterback Geno Smith at $5,700. You're almost still paying for the Geno Smith we thought we were getting.
Yeah, but you're getting elite quarterback Geno Smith. GPP side, Jared, what do you like?
Yeah, I mean, the big question in GPPs this week is what you do with the Bills-Chiefs game. It's tough to see it failing. It's also all those players are going to be heavily owned. You're not going to get anything sneaky in that game. I'm gonna have at least one Josh Allen lineup. I'm probably not gonna play a Mahomes lineup. I respect Buffalo's D. I think they can at least keep Mahomes from having a monster game. So I'm gonna have an Allen lineup. I also think Lamar Jackson is an awesome tournament play this week. He's $100 cheaper than Josh Allen. He's gonna be a third, a fourth of the ownership. And Lamar Jackson has the potential to match or beat Josh Allen in fantasy points this week. I mean, Lamar has been disappointing the last 2 weeks. That's come against the Bills and Bengals. They're 1st and 7th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks. He gets the Giants this week. They're 26th against quarterbacks. And you only have to look back to week 2 and 3. Lamar Jackson, 49 and 43 DraftKings points in those games. So again, I think there's a chance that Lamar is the highest scoring quarterback on the slate, and if that happens and you play him at a third of the ownership of Josh Allen, you're in a great spot.
Yeah, and I agree with the not really going after Mahomes lineups. I think one other thing working against him, besides the ultimate upside of Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson here, is that MVS and Juju Smith-Schuster, neither one it has the path that you can say, yeah, this is going to be the big week for this guy. Neither one is the kind of receiver that you have to be scared of missing on. Like, they have a good shot at 2 touchdowns, and they both seem like they're headed for ownership high enough that even if you happen to pick a guy that scores twice, it's not like you're getting an advantage on that much of the field, especially when you consider just how much focus there is on this particular matchup. So I agree with leaning away from them. And I think that you can get some exposure to this game by playing Travis Kelce, by playing one of the Bills receivers without having to play one of those quarterbacks. So in addition to Lamar Jackson, I also like Kirk Cousins at 6K against Miami's league worst pass defense. I like Geno Smith here at 5,700. I think the ownership will be up on him some, but I don't think it's going to get to the point of Josh Allen for sure. The high ownership on Tyler Lockett, I think, hurts the Geno Smith tournament lineup case a little bit, but not to the point where it's keeping him out of my plans. And then one more is Tom Brady at 6,300 against Pittsburgh. I think, he doesn't have the rushing, so that stops him from having the ultimate ceiling of somebody like Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson, but very high pass volume for them over the past few weeks, 52 pass attempts in 2 straight games, one of those a victory over Atlanta. So we're going to have a pass-happy offense. He's topped 350 yards in 2 straight, so a solid bet to get that 300-point bonus. Facing a defense that doesn't hold any threats, likely to get a little bit lower ownership on Brady and his receivers. And I think that you kind of make up for the difference in upside by playing 2 of his pass catchers so that if he does go off, like 370, 400 yards, even 4 touchdowns, you soak up all of that as opposed to worrying about what the Josh Allen owners are getting from him.
Yeah, you hit on the 2 guys, Brady and Cousins, that I'm considering outside of, Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. Like you said, the Bucs back to super pass heavy. I think this, based on the matchup, should be a pass heavy game plan from the Vikings as well. Minnesota's already 7th in pass rate over expected, so they've already been a pass leaning offense, and I think Miami's going to force them that way. I'll talk some more about their pass catchers when we get to the wide receivers, but with Geno, I mean, I want to play him in tournaments, but if his ownership stays at 12%, that's kind of tough for me to make that play. And we have the Tyler Lockett hamstring injury now, which is throwing a wrench into my entire GPP playing, because I wanted to have a ton of Tyler Lockett. So we'll see, what he does in Friday's practice and how he's listed on the final injury report.
That one. So here we go. So I guess with that, I'm leaning a bit more Kirk Cousins and Tom Brady as well. And then one final note on the Brady matchup: the Pittsburgh's 18th in pass defense DVOA, so middle of the league in that one, but 3rd most friendly to quarterbacks by our adjusted fantasy points allowed. You can find those adjusted fantasy points allowed on various pages on DraftSharks.com. You can also find the pass rate over expected that Jared was just referencing in an article that was just up for the first time this week on DS, right?
Yeah, we have a new contributor. Timmy Hernandez was actually a wide receiver at Oregon State too recently, so that's kind of cool. He's doing pass rate over expected stuff for us every week now, so that'll be up on DraftSharks for free.
So he adds not only statistical analysis, but brings up our speed as well.
For sure.
Running back for cash, Jared, what do you like?
Hey, there are a ton of attractive running back plays this week. I'm starting with Ramadri Stevenson for $6,000. And this is assuming Damian Harris is out, which I think is a safe bet. We'll probably find out for sure this afternoon. But if that's the case, it's going to be a couple of rookies behind Stevenson here. Pierre Strong, and then the Patriots promoted Kevin Harris from the practice squad yesterday. 4th and 6th round rookies. They have 0 touches combined this season. I don't think Bill Belichick is going to trust those guys with big roles. So I think you're going to see Stevenson handle 80 to 90% of this backfield work in a really good matchup against the Browns, who are dead last in both Football Outsiders run defense DVOA and adjusted fantasy points allowed to running backs.
I would say promoting Kevin Harris from the practice squad during the week is a clearer sign that Damian Harris is not playing than anything that the limited practices tell us. I would not be at all shocked, though, if we end today with Damian Harris listed as questionable, just knowing what the Patriots like to do in general.
I'd like that, because that'll keep people off Stevenson a little bit, I think. People that aren't paying attention enough.
Right. Yeah. So I agree that there are lots of options out here. Breece Hall at 5,800, I think, is attractive. He's really on track to be a guy very soon that's in the 7K range for salary. So I think we should go ahead and take advantage before he gets there. He's also in play for large field tourneys. I don't think the ownership rate on him is going to be too high. He's not sneaky, but he's not going to get to the point where he's owned by too large a chunk of the field. And then Joe Mixon makes me a little bit uncomfortable. But $6,900, he is priced well below what his touch count is, what his role in the offense is. He leads the league in touches. Salary is really more in line with the disappointing production from that. And the Saints are a negative scoring matchup for running backs once again. Probably more of a tournament play than a cash play on Mixon, just because of the disappointing performance so far. But I do think that he's cheap enough at 6,900 to be in play for a cash lineup if that kind of salary fits. He's had at least 3 receptions in every game. So again, the usage, not at all a problem. All he really needs to do is get lucky on a touchdown to not let us down at that level.
Yeah, I think Mixon for 6,900 would be a cash play for me most weeks. But again, there are so many options this week. I definitely don't think Mixon is a must. I prefer Alvin Kamara in that game for $200 cheaper. We've only gotten 2 healthy games out of Kamara this season, but he's seen really strong usage in those games, including a 20% target share. So you like that. Then I'm playing Eno Benjamin in cash, assuming James Conner and Darrell Williams are out. That would leave 6th-round rookie Keontae Ingram behind Eno Benjamin. I don't think they're going to load Benjamin up with like over 20 touches, because he's a smaller guy. But he can contribute in the passing game. I think you're going to get 4, 5, 6 targets out of him, maybe 10 to 14 carries, and he gets the Seattle defense, which is very bad. And he's just $4,600. So Benjamin again is one of the cheap guys I'm playing to fit in both Josh Allen and Justin Jefferson.
And even though I would agree on not projecting him for 20 plus touches, there's always the chance that he gets that in a random game, because it's not like they would be planning to do that over the course of the season. So yeah, I agree with Eno Benjamin being in the mix. GPP side, I'm going to start with Kareem Hunt at 5,700, 16th in opportunity share among running backs on the main slate, 23rd among all running backs in total touches for the season, leads all running backs in red zone opportunities, according to our historical stats page. He's got 2 more red zone opportunities than Nick Chubb so far, who ranks 3rd in that category. So the combo of those 2 guys being among the top 3 shows that the Browns are giving their running backs a lot of those opportunities. Kareem Hunt right in the mix for those high value opportunities with Nick Chubb. They're playing what should be a run funnel defense in the Patriots this week. He's projected for very low ownership right now versus his price and his role so far. So Kareem Hunt definitely squarely inside of my tournament lineup plans.
For sure. Yeah. Again, there's so many good running back plays this week that there's going to be some strong guys that just get overlooked because you can't play everyone. So Hunt is definitely on my list. The Browns are 3-point home favorites in this game. So that's a good setup for the ground game. I think at the same price tag, Raheem Mostert, $5,700. He returned to a limited practice on Thursday. We'll see what he does on Friday and how he's listed on the final injury report. I still think he's probably more just getting some rest, during the middle of the week than having a actual knee injury, but we'll see on that. But, Mostert, 70% of the Dolphins offensive snaps over the last 2 weeks, 77% of the running back carries, even has an 8.5% target share over that time frame. So he's getting like at least strong RB2 level usage. So I like the price tag here against a pretty beatable Vikings run defense. And then I like Aaron Jones too for tournaments, $7,600. We'll see if last week's usage was the start of a trend or more just a 1 week blip where you had Jones playing 73% of the Packers offensive snaps. I'm kind of buying into it just because, again, I think he's been their best running back. I think the Packers kind of went into the season thinking, okay, let's just split this 50-50 down the middle, keep both Dillon and Jones fresh and healthy. But Jones has just outplayed Dillon. So I think they might kind of start moving towards him as the clear leader. And it's just a good setup for the Packers offense and the running game in general. You have Green Bay 7-point home favorites against the Jets. They have the 4th highest implied total on the main slate. So there's always big touchdown upside with Aaron Jones.
I'm less willing to bet that last week is the start of a trend as opposed to an outlier. We'll see. Maybe that is the case, but the good part there is we don't need that to be the case for Aaron Jones to make sense. Even if it's back to a split, there's still plenty of upside, both receiving and touchdown wise. I want to talk a little bit about Kenneth Walker, $5,400. He's projected for higher ownership, according to our numbers right now, than Breece Hall and Raheem Mostert in the same range. You can easily make the upside case for Kenneth Walker, the player, but looking at that, I would much rather play Breece Hall and Raheem Mostert in the same range over Kenneth Walker.
Me too. And I think Walker's a good value for the price tag. And like in other weeks, I'd consider playing him in cash. He's not going to make my top 3 this week for cash. And I think at the ownership, I am going to fade him in tournaments. The Cardinals have actually been pretty solid against the run this season. It's their pass defense that's been very bad. And we just don't know how big a role Walker is going to play in the passing game, which is big on DraftKings with the full PPR. So I'm probably going to end up fading Walker in tournaments.
One other running back to talk about here. We already talked about him on the cash side, but I wonder, Jared, if the situation is so good for Ramadri Stevenson that we just go ahead and play him a fair amount, obviously not, in every single lineup, but a fair amount despite a high ownership projection. And I saw from Justin Freeman on Twitter this week at Justin Freeman 18. He tweeted this thread that in part talked about how the chalk on players right now isn't as high as it once was. So like if you get this chalk running back, he might be more like 25% owned in a large field tournament versus 40% a few years ago. And that's, different enough that it should impact decisions on a specific player less than it did when it was higher.
Yeah, that's totally like the next level of DFS now. Is like people are looking at ownership projections, seeing someone is high owned, and then not playing them because of that. I play the not high dollar tournaments, but more mid stakes where it's $50, $100 single entry tournaments, and it's even more pronounced in those where like the chalk just isn't as chalky because people are factoring in the ownership stuff. So it's a whole another stage of thinking you need to go through when trying to pick out these tournament plays.
To me, Stevenson is just so well set up for work and likely success that I would not fade him just because he's highly owned this week.
Yeah, I'm going to have a ton of Stevenson in tournaments.
There's the chance that he just goes off, hits 120 yards and scores twice. And you get left out by not playing him as opposed to the advantage on the field.
Yeah, 120 and 2 on the ground, and he could catch 4 or 5 passes because he's doing that for the Patriots as well.
Mm-hmm. So cash for wideout, Jared. Where are you starting?
Yeah, again, we'll see about Tyler Lockett with the hamstring. He's a good value if we can project him for his normal role. But I'm going to play Rondale Moore. He's the cheap wide receiver. I'm going to play just $4,200 still. I mean, he ran around on 91% of the pass plays last week. Was in the slot for 83% of his snaps. That's where we want him. Got the 8 targets last week at 19% target share. Good matchup against Seattle. He's just too cheap for the role and volume we can project him for right now.
Yeah, it's Greg Dortch. You go ahead and play that in your DFS lineups. Yeah, it would be nice to pair him with Tyler Lockett. I wish we had a Tyler Lockett because that'd just be a nice way to start things out. Lockett at 5,600, Rondale Moore at 4,200, and then you kind of build out from there. Christian Kirk, I feel okay about at 5,800 though, especially if we need a replacement for Tyler Lockett in that same range. His salary is down $800 versus the past 2 weeks, thanks to Jacksonville's struggles in those 2 games. He was over 19 DK points though in each of the first 3 games this year. That included a season high 25.8 DK points against the Colts in week 2. I think the ownership projection is plenty low enough to put him in play for tourney lineups, but I do believe in Kirk enough to have him in play for cash here. The Jaguars, obviously, it would be better if they didn't struggle the way they did the past 2 weeks, but Kirk has at least had the usage every time, even though the 2 down games for him as well the past 2 weeks. He had the 9 targets against the Eagles. He was on the field more than any other Jaguars pass catcher last week. So, it's no game has truly been worrisome for him in terms of role and likely production, I think.
Yeah, I like Kirk. I think he bounces back this week. I actually had him as a tournament play, but I do think if you want to kind of build out a Tyler Lockett lineup and then save the $200 to just get up to Christian Kirk, or Jacoby Myers is $300 less than Tyler Lockett. I think he's a pretty solid cash game play. Tyler Boyd is $5,100. If T Higgins is out, I think he's a nice cash game play. So there are other options in that range if you just want to hope you can get Tyler Lockett, but if not, then you can pivot down to those guys. And then again, I'm playing Justin Jefferson in cash. $8,900. I'm going to pay it. I just love this spot for the Vikings passing game. As you talked about, Matt, the Dolphins have just been a pass funnel. They're much tougher against than the run versus the run than the pass. Teams are kind of acting accordingly, going pass heavy against Miami. So I expect that from Minnesota. And we have Xavian Howard, who is iffy for this week. I think he's going to play. He's been limited in practice the first 2 days of the week. He's not going to be at 100%, and that's trouble when you're facing Justin Jefferson.
And frankly, he's talented, but he hasn't been a shutdown guy in terms of stopping opposing receivers from getting their numbers. And Justin Jefferson's not a guy that you bench for a matchup anyway. So yeah, like that. Other guys I'm throwing in here. We talked some about the Bills-Chiefs matchup. Gabe Davis at 6,500 looks like he's going to come in lower owned than he really should. 5% is the early projection. We'll watch those numbers bounce around and see where they end up over the weekend. But like Gabe Davis, clearly Stephon Diggs is the top bet here, but he's not a lock to outscore Gabe Davis straight up. So I think that I would be surprised if Davis is in the single digits. And if he is, I mean, he's a smash play from there, because we already saw in the playoffs last year what the ultimate ceiling for him is in this game that is projected to have more points than any other on the week.
Yeah. And I mean, if you want to talk about this game a bit more, the Chiefs and Bills have met 4 times over the past 2 seasons. The Chiefs have held Diggs down pretty well in all 4 of those games. He hasn't had a big game, despite Josh Allen putting up some nice numbers. So that's, I would guess, obviously been part of their game plan, is to kind of, limit Diggs and make the rest of these guys beat them. Gabe Davis obviously did that in last year's playoff meeting. I'd be surprised if he comes in at 5%, but we'll see as the ownership projections change over the next couple of days.
I thought it was interesting too that for the Chiefs in that big playoff matchup last year with lots of points and all that, Travis Kelce was the only Chief with an average depth of target deeper than 5.9 yards. Tyreek Hill was at 5.3 in that game. Mm-hmm. So I was looking at that for what that means for this year's Chiefs receivers. MVS is at 11.1 and ADOT. Juju's at 7.4. So obviously if we're looking short ADOT, that kind of favors Juju. I think though that they both spent close to the same amount of time in the slot. So there's a chance for either of those guys to be running short stuff. Again, though, the combo of salary plus the projected ownership on both of them, which is double digits right now. I don't love either of the 2 main Chiefs wideouts. Makes me wonder if maybe Mecole Hardman is in play as like the sneaky guy. He's got the run after catch ability, likely to be much lower owned than the other 2. I also wonder if one of the running backs is the sneaky play here if you're looking for a sleeper in the matchup. CEH, 6,300 is a little bit expensive for his role, which has been variable, but he's been the touchdown scorer among the running backs. Jerick McKinnon, though, $4,700. Yeah. He's 1,600 cheaper than CEH. He's only 2 opportunities behind CEH in the red zone, 12-10 in favor of Edwards-Helaire so far.
Yeah, McKinnon is the guy I would consider if you're in like if you're in the Millie Maker or some other, big multi-entry tournament. I just hate wasting a running back spot on someone like that where, the projection is just so low. But I do think, he looked good last time out. He got, more playing time than he had been. And if I think McKinnon, is kind of the Chiefs guy if they're playing from behind. So if you're playing a Josh Allen stack, hoping for the Bills to get out to a lead, I think McKinnon makes some sense. It would be tough for me to do, and I'm definitely not going to be doing it in the single entry tournaments. But yeah, it's a good point you make. But the Bills defense just keeps everything in front of them. That's what they do. They don't give up deep balls, and Tyreek Hill beat them last year by taking those short passes for long gains, and Juju can't do that. MVS theoretically can because he's fast, but he really hasn't done it much throughout his career. So I can't get myself to play either of those Chiefs wideouts. Yeah,
that's where I'm leaning as well. That's what made me wonder about Mecole Hardman. But, obviously beyond those top 2, it's like, well, maybe this could work out. And you have to, I would have to be playing a bunch of tournament lineups to get to that point, as opposed to having it being a central strategy.
And the thing with Hardman is he's losing snaps now to Sky Moore. That might continue. We might see those guys play similar number of snaps on Sunday.
Yeah. Tyler Boyd, I like on this side as well, 5,100. You tend to think of him and players like him as more of a cash play, but if he's their wide receiver 2 in this game, and it certainly seems like it's trending that way, he's got plenty of target and reception upside, especially in a matchup that's, again, tough on running back scoring, and the Bengals running game has been disappointing so far. So there's plenty of, reception upside, and Tyler Boyd gets 7 catches. He's got a shot to hit that. 100-yard bonus as well. Marquise Brown, I think, is headed for lower ownership than I would have guessed, probably because of $7,200 salary. But, looking at him, his usage so far, 10 plus targets in every game from week 2 on, and the matchup, which has been terrific for wide receivers. If he's headed for single digit ownership, he should be somebody to definitely force into lineups.
Yes, I like the Brown call. He feels expensive, but that's a fair price based on the usage he's been getting, and like you said, this plus matchup. So, 2 more expensive wide receiver. I mean, my tournament build this week is definitely going to be going expensive at wide receiver and cheaper at running back. So 2 more expensive receivers. I like Jamar Chase. I'm assuming we're going to have no T. Higgins this week, so I think Chase is a good bet for 10 plus targets, and Marshawn Lattimore is iffy for the Saints. He did not practice on Wednesday or Thursday. That'd be a massive loss if they don't have him for this Chase matchup. And then Mike Evans, $7,000. The Steelers are dead last in adjusted fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. They've already allowed the Steelers to have 5 wide receivers to score 26 plus DraftKings points against them through 5 games. So that secondary is struggling. We know Mike Evans is a guy who can go for 100 plus yards and a couple touchdowns any given week. So I like him in tournament slot. He's coming in at low projected ownership. I think he's at 5% right now.
Yeah, it only makes him and Tom Brady more attractive, I think, on this week's slate. Tight end, I think you can start out, you can just look at the expensive guys if you want to, but if you want to not factor in the tight end salary yet, you can look in the 3K range. We got Hayden Hurst at 3,300. We've got Evan Ingram at 3,500, Irv Smith at 3,200. I would love to say that I have a specific favorite among those guys, but they're 11th, 12th, and 13th at the position in targets so far. Ingram and Hurst are separated by 1 catch in Hurst's favor so far, 11 total yards in Ingram's favor. Hurst has 2 touchdowns versus 0 for Ingram, but the end zone targets are 2-1 in Ingram's favor. They're 8-9. Those 2 guys are in our PPR rankings this week. And then, Irv Smith has been the disappointing receiver among the 3, especially so far, but he might have the best matchup, worst pass defense in the league, 4th most friendly tight end scoring matchup. So all 3 of these guys, I think you can make the case for any of them if you want to just get a cheap tight end in there.
Yeah, Irv, I like. He's going to be the tournament play for me just because I don't trust his role as much as I do the other 2 guys. So I like you said, the matchup's great for Irv Smith. I like the Vikings passing game in general this week, so I'm going to be using him in tournaments. I prefer Evan Ingram if I can, afford the $200 extra for cash over Hayden Hurst. I just like his matchup better. The Colts are 26th in Football Outsiders tight end coverage rankings, 22nd in adjusted points allowed to tight ends. And we saw the Jags feature Evan Ingram when these teams met in week 2. Ingram led Jacksonville with 8 targets in a game that Trevor Lawrence only threw it 30 times because it was a blowout win for the Jags. So 27% target share for Evan Ingram in that game. I think he's a really safe target bet. So is Hayden Hurst, though, especially if T. Higgins does not play. Hurst saw 20% of Cincinnati's targets last week when Higgins only played a few snaps.
Mentioned positive matchups for all those guys. The best tight end scoring matchup so far has been Seattle. They get Zach Ertz at $4,900. I'm not sure that he fits into the cash build at that salary level where you either go above him or below him. Definitely a solid tourney option, though. He's 4th among tight ends in targets on the season. He would rank 19th among wide receivers in targets on the season. There are only 10 wideouts ahead of him in targets on the year on this main slate. So I think beyond tight end, even, I think Ertz fits as a flex option on this particular slate. He's the 5th most expensive tight end, but he's tied for just 29th among wideouts in price right now. He would be wide receiver 27 on the year in total PPR points. So if you want to get Travis Kelce or Mark Andrews into that tight end slot, I think you can still look at Zach Ertz like he's a cheap wideout and consider him for a flex spot this week.
For tournaments, right? I mean, I wouldn't do that for cash. Yeah. I think it's viable. There are not many cheap wide receivers I really like for tournaments. So I think that's worth considering Ertz in the flex spot. I do like him a lot for tournaments. You don't think of Ertz as a high upside guy, and that he's not going to break off a 40-yard catch like even like David Njoku could. But the volume gives Ertz upside, and also Ertz leads all tight ends with a 42% target share inside the red zone so far this season. So he's kind of been Kyler Murray's go-to guy when they're near the end zone. So I think there's definitely touchdown upside.
It's because it's him and Shrimps and the mummy of AJ Green.
Exactly.
And, speaking of his yardage, I mean, we had 179 receiving yards from TJ Hawkinson against the Seattle defense. So if Zach Ertz is going to break a long one like he did in one game last year after joining the Cardinals, this is the spot.
I mean, Hawkinson's a big time athlete. Ertz isn't, but
Theoretically.
yeah, I like him. Yeah.
All right. Who else you got?
I'm going to mention George Kittle again. Didn't work out last week, but I still think playing George Kittle at $5,100 at low ownership in a good matchup against Atlanta. The Niners have a 25-point implied total. It's like 7th or 8th highest this week because it's projected to be a high scoring week, but that's still a nice implied total. So I think Kittle's worth playing. Then I'm going to try to have a ton of Mark Andrews too. I go back to, I don't know what it is now, but I think after like the first 4 weeks, it was like, 3 of the first 4 weeks, the Millie Maker was won with a team with either Travis Kelce or Mark Andrews, just because those guys, one of them's probably putting up like 25 plus points this week. And if no other tight end scores more than like 15, you're probably going to need one of these two elite tight ends. I like Andrews. I think he's going to be lower owned than Travis Kelce. He's $7,000 and he gets a good matchup. The Giants are 25th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to tight ends.
Yeah, we'll see where the numbers go, but he's projected ahead of Kelce in ownership right now. So
I think he should be.
We'll see if that changes in the weekend. I think they'll both be up there, or I'm not sure that it's going to make a huge difference between them. Yeah. But that's one potential mark in Kelce's favor versus Andrews. The other thing, of course, is that Mark Andrews is playing in a game where it's projected for 8 fewer total points than Bills Chiefs. Right. Maybe we just get a more sluggish game, but obviously what we're shooting for here is a Ravens blowout, that he is the guy soaking up targets and getting those touchdown opportunities from your Lamar Jackson lineup. Yeah,
just 12% projected ownership for Andrew, so I'll definitely play that if that's the case. I also think all these Bills and Chiefs are going to come in higher owned than they're projected, just because people are going to be stacking that game and just naturally playing these guys.
Mm-hmm. On defense, Panthers sit there at $2,400 at the top of our DK dollars per point, and they face the Rams, who should absolutely not be a good matchup for a fantasy defense, but they have been the second best scoring matchup for fantasy defenses on the year by our adjusted fantasy points allowed. So I'm just going to go with the Panthers here and not even bother trying to fit any others in, cash lineups and probably most of the time for tournaments.
Yeah, me too. I'm playing the Panthers. I think the fact that the Rams are a good matchup is legit. I think it's going to continue. The O-line is horrible, and they have like 2 viable pass catchers in Cooper Kupp and Tyler Higbee. It's just not a good offense right now. And the Panthers defense is solid. I mean, it's a middle of the pack defense. I think they're actually 8th among main slate defenses in DraftKings points per game so far.
Mm-hmm. If salary doesn't matter, if you're looking at ownership rates for a GPP lineup, the Vikings look like they're trending for very low ownership, and they're going to be facing Skylar Thompson. So if you can afford a $3,400 defense, you can play them. Skylar Thompson last week took pressure on 21 of his 35 dropbacks, which is obscene. Like they should have charged the Jets defense with assault in that game. 16 quarterback hits. So if you look at the line, it's 2 sacks for Thompson. It looks like it wasn't that bad. 16 quarterback hits. There were a couple of Jets with 5+ hits in that game. So it could be an ugly game for the Miami offense here.
For sure. Yeah, I like that play. I mean, I though prefer Jacksonville for $3,000. I mean, I think that's a better defense in Minnesota. Matt Ryan's been a disaster. Matt Ryan has 7 interceptions and 11 fumbles through 5 games. Now, he's only lost 3 of those fumbles, but that's lucky. Those are 50-50. He's going to start losing more of those. And the Colts O-line just isn't good. Like that was an elite O-line for the past handful of years. It's a bottom 10 O-line right now. So I think it sets up really nicely for Jacksonville, who, of course, shut out Indianapolis when they played in week 2.
Yeah, I focus on yardage for the Underdog Pick'ems article every week, but Matt Ryan over 0.5 interceptions might be the best bet every week at this point.
Yeah, I think it is.
That's going to do it for this week 6 DraftKings podcast. Head over to draftsharks.com now to play around with the lineup generator, build your own lineups to play on DraftKings, on FanDuel, and on Yahoo. You can also find Jared's articles highlighting the top picks for both cash and GPP entries on DraftKings, only if you're a DS Insider, and it's not too late to become that. You can become a DS Insider right now and then just roll it into next draft season as well. We'll keep you going and hit you with all the goodness. If you're watching us on stream, stick around, take like a 10-second break, and then we're back for the FanDuel show. For Jared Smola and the rest of the Draft Sharks crew, I'm Matt Schaff saying thanks so much for swimming with us. It is Friday, October 14th here at Draft Shark Studios in Rochester, New York. Welcome to our Week 6 FanDuel podcast. I'm your host, Matt Schaff. With me, as always, is Jared Smola. Jared, Should the question at quarterback for cash here not be who do you like, but instead maybe every week? Should it just be, all right, is it Josh Allen or somebody else?
This might surprise you. I'm actually not going to play Allen in cash on FanDuel. They're actually, and we'll get to it when we get to the other positions, but it's not that there's fewer good cheap plays, but the cheap plays on FanDuel aren't as cheap as they are on DraftKings. So it's actually, to me, it's tougher to fit Josh Allen into lineups over here. So I'm actually going to play Tom Brady in cash on FanDuel, $7,500. And we've mentioned, said that Bucs have gone back to their pass heavy ways the last 2 weeks. And if you want the actual numbers, if you look at pass rate over expected, the Bucs have been plus 16% and plus 18% the past 2 weeks. By comparison, the Bills lead the league in pass rate over expected right now at 14%. So, the way it's trending, the Bucs might be the pass heaviest offense the rest of the season. And this Steelers pass defense has not been good so far. They're 30th in adjusted points allowed to quarterbacks. So, Brady's not going to outscore Josh Allen likely, but I feel good about him putting up a big enough total for the, $1,700 savings we're getting here.
Yeah, and we should expect the Bucs to be the pass heaviest offense. They were the past 2 years. They're built that way again. They're getting their receivers healthy. It's still kind of in the getting healthy process, but they've got them back better than they were over the first few weeks. So yeah, certainly like Tom Brady. I like the salary savings that you mentioned. He's part of a tier that I think you can take any of the three. Brady at 7,500, Geno Smith 7,400, Kirk Cousins 7,600. I think all those guys are good floor bets. Based on what's happened with all of them so far, and they're all in positive matchups. So any of those three I like. I'll also take that crew for tournament lineups over Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes options. That's going to be the centerpiece game. We've got the Josh Allen ownership rate trending pretty high on FanDuel right now. He obviously beats all those guys in ceiling, but he's projected for double the ownership of the next highest quarterbacks in the numbers that we have in our lineup generator tool right now. He's also $1,600 more than anybody in that Brady, Geno, Cousins tier. So with those prices, and you talked about the salaries, I saw the same thing looking at them for this week. I'd rather take that savings at quarterback. I'd maybe stick in a pass catcher from the Bills Chiefs game, either Travis Kelce, Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis, whatever, get some exposure to it that way, but then double stack my quarterback from the cheaper range with two of his pass catchers and absorb some, receiving ultimate ceiling that not as many people are getting in my tournament.
Yeah, I'm a bit surprised to see Allen projected for more ownership on FanDuel here than DraftKings again. Based on kind of what I'm looking at and how I've been building lineups, I do think Allen's easier to fit on DraftKings actually this week. I said I wasn't going to play Geno on DraftKings at 12% projected ownership, but he's projected for just 6% on FanDuel. So if that's the case, I do like Geno for tournaments. He's been awesome. I'm mostly buying into it. Matchup's awesome against the Cardinals. I think that should be a high-scoring game. So I like Geno for tournaments. I do like Kirk Cousins for tournaments. I think it's going to be a pass-heavy game plan against a pretty bad Dolphins defense for Minnesota. And then I like Lamar Jackson here too. So he's projected at 7% ownership for 17% for Josh Allen. I think Allen outscores, Lamar Jackson 60% of the time in this setup this week. But I would not be shocked if Lamar is the highest scoring quarterback on the slate this week. He already has 2 games of 40 plus FanDuel points this season. So, getting him for less than half of Allen's ownership, I think is a good tournament play.
I agree. Over running back, the first 2 running backs that pop for me, Ramadri Stevenson, 7,500, Raheem Mostert, 6,500. Mostert's game has the 3rd highest over-under on the week right now. He should be leaned on, assuming that his knee is fine, and he did return to limited practice Thursday. We'll check on his status today and obviously for the weekend, but I would expect Mostert to be ready to play. So looking at those 2 guys, I got 2 workhorses to start out my lineup at 75 and 6,500 bucks. That opens up, I think, a lot of roster flexibility where, we do find a lot more expensive options, especially once we get to wide receiver on FanDuel.
Yeah, Stevenson's definitely where I'm starting. I think he is a safe bet for 20 plus touches this week and, could get 25 plus in a really good matchup against Cleveland. So I like that. I like Alvin Kamara for $8,100. He's played 2 healthy games so far this season, 71% of the Saints offensive snaps in those games, 38 carries and 13 targets. So I think he's another guy that's a good bet for 20 plus touches. And this third spot is tough. I think Mostert's in play. I think Aaron Jones is in play at $7,300. And even if they revert back to, the backfield split they had been using prior to last week. And I think Jones is a pretty solid value for 7,300 as a big home favorite against the Jets. And then Saquon Barkley, I'm considering too. I want to see a bit more about the shoulder. That has me slightly concerned as a cash game play. But, again, if he's like not on the final injury report today, I think I'd feel pretty good about Barkley and cash.
Yep, I have those guys down as third running back options as well. I think Kenneth Walker is okay to consider at $6,500, depending on how the build is otherwise. I think he's a pretty good bet to get 15 carries in this game. We'll see about the receiving part, but he's a good runner. It's a fine matchup. Leonard Fournette at 8,500, I think, is one other guy to consider. Similar to Saquon in that we can bet on the work getting to him in a matchup with Atlanta that's good for everybody. So he should certainly be involved regardless of exactly what they're doing offense wise. I'm sorry, not Atlanta for them, Pittsburgh this week. So the rushing might not be as easy, but we've seen Leonard Fournette is plenty involved on the receiving end as well. One guy that seems like he might fit is Joe Mixon, but I don't like Jared, the combo of floor salary here at $7,800 with the matchup against the Saints, who again are tough on running games.
Yeah, Mixon's a tournament play for me. I think he's going to be pretty low owned, just sandwiched in between Alvin Kamara and Ramadri Stevenson. You have Saquon Barkley for 1,000 more. Aaron Jones, I think, is going to be more popular than Joe Mixon. So I do like him in tournaments, just as a guy who should again get 20 plus touches in what is still an offense that has potential to put up a lot of points. So I like that call. I like Kareem Hunt for tournaments as well. We talked about him on the DraftKings show. I think he's a better value here, even at $6,000. We'll see what the projected ownership is going to come in at. But, even playing behind Nick Chubb, Hunt's averaging 11.5 carries per game, 3.2 targets per game. He's a top 20 running back in expected fantasy points. And we just have a great matchup here for this Browns running game against the Patriots. They're 28th in Football Outsiders run defense, DVOA. Browns are 3-point home favorites, so it's a great spot for the running game. You're saving so much going down from Nick Chubb to Kareem Hunt.
Yeah, not quite enough touches that you like him in a cash lineup, but
right.
Very close to Nick Chubb and touchdown opportunities. So that's where you like to shoot for the upside in a game that should be run heavy. Jonathan Taylor is worth mentioning. He's down to $8,000. He did return to a limited practice Thursday, so we'll have to see about his Friday status. We'll see about what they're saying heading into the weekend. Definitely not in cash plans, even at the $8,000 level. But if there's no indication that he's going to be limited in his role, I mean, who has more upside as a player than Jonathan Taylor?
Yeah, that's a good call. It's like it would honestly be tough for me to click his name and play him in a lineup because he's coming off the ankle, because he's been disappointing so far, and because the matchup is tough. But that's exactly why he's probably going to be 2% owned, and that probably makes him a good tournament play.
I think one more thing to consider is pairing Aaron Jones and Breece Hall together. Neither one's going to be sneaky on his own, but I think that combo could be sneaky in that you don't normally want to put running backs against each other in the same matchup because you're betting on one team to score a lot, win the game, lean on its running back, and then the other team should be throwing more, trailing in that game. But here we have Aaron Jones, Breece Hall, both guys that are more game script independent in that they should be heavily involved, whether a team is ahead or behind, whether they're running more or throwing more. So I like them as an interesting combo, 7,300, 7,100, both very affordable for the upside that they provide.
Like that idea. I think both running games could have success.
Wide receiver for cash, what do you like?
Yeah, so I'm probably going to end up playing, 3 running backs at 7,500 plus. So I need a couple cheap wide receivers. One of them is going to be Adam Thielen for me. $5,900. Again, I love this spot for Minnesota's passing game. So I think, that should carry Thielen, who he's averaging 7.8 targets on a 19% target share over the last 4 games now. He was quiet in week 1, but since then he's, playing a similar role to what he had in, the past couple seasons behind Justin Jefferson. So I like Thielen. Then I might go to Romeo Doubs in cash. He's just $5,500. He's a full-time receiver in this offense. He's averaging 7 targets over his last 3 games. Good matchup against the Jets here. I think, that's enough for a guy that cheap for cash.
Are you playing them both in the same lineup or they're both cash options for you?
Yeah, right now my cash lineup has those 2 guys, and then Mike Evans is my third cash receiver at $7,700. Again, I love the spot for this Bucks passing game.
Yeah, we've alluded to it before now, but the salaries are definitely up here. I think it's probably a signal of the salaries getting more efficient, reacting
Mhm.
to the way these guys have produced after starting the year a little softer. Dobbs and Adam Thielen at 8th and ninth in our FanDuel dollars per point projections. They're the first guys in the list that have salaries under 7,500. So if you are playing, our top guys in terms of projections versus value this week, you're going to have to pay up at wide receiver. So there's decisions to make there in terms of where you're spending by position here. I do like Deebo Samuel at 7,600 against Atlanta. It's always tough to bet on the Niners as like a cash passing game, but his numbers have been there 5, 6, and 2 receptions in the 4 games with Jimmy Garoppolo so far. Last week's 2 receptions came on 9 targets, so the usage was still there. He never got the salary boost from the big Monday night game against the Rams back in week 4 because it was after the next week's salaries came out. And then last week's game was disappointing, so he didn't get, the salary correction there. So 7,600, I think, is still below what Deebo should be. And again, the Atlanta matchup is good for everything. So the only potential limitation is San Francisco deciding where it wants to go with the ball.
Yeah, he's definitely an option. He feels too cheap. Just looking at the game logs though, like he's only top 12 FanDuel points in one of his 5 games. Which we're happy about. He was our early round bust pick, and it's worked out so far. I mean, he had the big game on national TV against the Rams. But other than that, he's just kind of been okay so far.
Mm-hmm. On the GPP side, that's where I like Mike Evans a little bit more. I guess he's probably a better target bet than I give him credit for at this point. He still feels a bit more like Mike Williams, but maybe he's a sturdier version of Mike Williams.
Yeah, I'd say so. Mike Williams with a more proven track record, a longer track record.
Mm-hmm. So what else do you like for GPP lineups at wideout?
Yeah, I like paying up for Justin Jefferson in GPPs, $9,200. But again, I think this could be a massive game for him and this Vikings passing game in general. I like Jamar Chase for tournaments, $8,100. I don't think T. Higgins is going to play. Marshawn Lattimore is iffy for the Saints. They're top corner. So it's been a disappointing season for Chase so far, but I still think he has that big game in him. And I think this is a good buy low spot for Christian Kirk, $7,000. So he's not super cheap on FanDuel. I think that's going to keep his ownership down. He's had 2 bad fantasy games in a row now, but really last week was the first time he didn't see 20+% of Jacksonville's targets. You had Doug Peterson come out a couple days ago and say, Christian Kirk needs to be getting, I think he said like 9, 10, or 11 targets per game were the numbers that Doug Peterson actually used. But, Kirk has been at that level for, a handful of games this season already. So this could be a game where they, specifically look to get Christian Kirk going again.
Yeah, you love hearing that from the guy who's in charge of the offense, because that means he's going to be scheming in looks for Christian Kirk for an offense that needs it after the way it performed the past 2 weeks. So I love that note. I'm definitely going to be playing Christian Kirk. I totally agree with Jamar Chase. Like, he's disappointing so far, but he's disappointing in a way where you look at it and you're like, yeah, but he's going to have a big game at some point. He's on pace for more targets and catches than last year. The yardage is down, the ADOT's shorter, but it's not like, Jamar Chase forgot how to play or they forgot to throw the ball his way. It's just Cincinnati is a little bit sluggish right now, and nothing has changed there to make you really worry. So I think this is a nice spot for Jamar Chase, and the projected ownership is in the single digits right now. And it's just like a week where I don't see a reason where it's going to significantly alter even once T. Higgins is ruled out for this game because of the other games that are on the slate. We do have Mike Evans, who's also projected for low ownership at the moment. Like, between those two, I think there's a better chance that Mike Evans jumps in ownership as we get closer to Sunday than Jamar Chase, just based on what's happened so far.
Yeah, I think they both might get up to like 10%, but I don't think they're going to get much higher than that. Just like you said, everyone's going to be attacking that Bills-Chiefs game.
Tyler Lockett is going to sneak into consideration here if like the hamstring has people scared off of him, because the situation's great. We're going to have to watch that situation with his hamstring though. He's a little bit expensive for cash lineups too, $7,500, but certainly the ceiling will be there if it seems like he's ready to go.
Did you set the pricing on FanDuel this week? Because Tyler Lockett is more expensive than DK Metcalf.
That's just reality, baby. It's finally catching up. Tight end. For cash at tight end, Jared, I think it's really whatever fits salary-wise for your particular lineup. We've got, Zach Ertz. We've got Tyler Higbee in the 6K range. We've got Mark Andrews, Travis Kelce up high. And then if you want to go down to the 5K, I don't feel like I need to for my FanDuel lineups, but if you want to, there are several options down there as well.
Yeah, I mean, Mark Andrews is our top dollars per point value. Now, again, to me, it's tough to fit him in a cash lineup because there are no like really good cheap plays. So I have Zach Ertz in mind right now, $6,000. I mean, he's just seeing awesome volume. Ertz is he has 9.3 targets over his last 4 games now. He was limited in the opener. Since then, he has 10 plus targets in 3 of his last 4 games. In Seattle, dead last in adjusted points allowed to tight ends. Part of that's due to Taysom Hill last week, but Football Outsiders also has them dead last in tight end coverage. So, Ertz just a good volume bet and a good matchup.
Yeah, he would be my lean there as well. We'll see exactly how the build goes. For tournament lineups, it looks like the ownership's going to be pretty concentrated among 4 guys: Mark Andrews, Travis Kelce, Tyler Higbee, Zach Ertz. All those guys are 6K or above. None needs to be out of your plans, I don't think, for that ownership level, because I think it's going to be balanced enough among them that none is like fade that guy because he's going to be on a third of the teams in this tournament. George Kittle, if you look at our FanDuel dollars per point rankings, he jumps out among the group because he's cheaper than those other guys and he's going to be lower owned than those other guys. Atlanta, the matchup, like I said, positive for everything. So the question isn't, can George Kittle produce against Atlanta? Will San Francisco give him the opportunities to produce? So that's why it's a tournament play. You take a shot on him getting the opportunities here. He's 8th among tight ends in target share on the season, 6th among main slate tight ends. So not even a big leap in terms of his usage so far. It's just whether San Francisco passes the ball enough to get him those opportunities and where on the field those opportunities show up.
Yeah, the usage has been there. I mean, I think it's a 17.5% target share. You'd like that up a little bit, but the routes have been there. Kittle's not blocking too much. That has not been the problem. Now he's so cheap on FanDuel that he's attracting more attention than he is on DraftKings. 8% is not a super low ownership number, but I still think he's a good tournament play. Then Irv Smith is the other guy I wanted to mention here, just $4,900. His route rates have been climbing each week now. He's 64 and 69% the last 2 weeks. Those are his 2 highest marks of the season. And then Miami, 29th in both adjusted fantasy points allowed to tight ends and Football Outsiders tight end coverage ranking. So I like Irv Smith as a one-off, and I definitely like Irv Smith if you're playing a Viking stack this week.
And I definitely like Irv Smith better in a lineup that I can forget about if it doesn't work out than in my season-long lineup where I have to look back and see that I lost by 6 points because I trusted Irv Smith.
Yeah, not safe, but there's definitely upside this week.
Yeah, I totally agree. All right, defense, Jared, where are you going?
Yeah, I'm going Panthers here too. We talked about him on DraftKings, but just $3,700 on FanDuel. Rams, 31st in our adjusted fantasy points allowed to defenses, and it makes sense because you watch them play. It's a bad O-line, and there's nothing downfield. Everything's short, and it's all Cooper Kupp and Tyler Higbee. I just think the offense is going to continue to struggle until they get a third weapon there to throw to. The running game sucks, so I think Carolina is a safe bet, even though they're big road underdogs, not a spot you usually play defenses. But the Cowboys were road underdogs last week, and they came through for us.
Yes. And, obviously they got somewhat lucky on scoring the defensive touchdown, but also held the Rams to 10 points in that game. So the Rams just stink on offense relative to what they should be at this point. So I certainly agree with that. If the salary doesn't wind up mattering a whole lot, we have the Rams, we have the Jaguars, we do have the Bucks all the way up at 5K. Probably not going to get to that one, but I think Rams, Jaguars are certainly well within reach if we find the salary space sitting around.
Yeah, I love the Jags. I think attacking Matt Ryan is going to be a good play all season. And then on the cheaper end for tournaments, I like both defenses in the Saints-Bengals game. The Bengals, Joe Burrow just takes a bunch of sacks. That's been his thing since he entered the NFL, since he has allowed the 4th most sacks so far this season. And then for the Bengals defense, the Saints are just all kinds of banged up. I don't know if Michael Thomas is going to play. Jarvis Landry's iffy. Chris Olave's iffy. So, and Cincinnati, as we talked about on yesterday's show, has been a solid defense this season. And I kind of buy that continuing.
Yeah. Yep. I can't argue with either of those. But that's going to do it for the Week 6 FanDuel podcast. Head over to DraftSharks.com now. You can play around with the lineup generator, build your own lineups for playing in various types of contests on FanDuel, on DraftKings, on Yahoo. You can also find Kevin's tips with specific player picks for both cash and GPP entries on FanDuel this week. For Jared Small and the rest of the Draft Sharks crew, I'm Matt Schauf saying thanks so much for swimming with us.